Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our LinkedIn Live. If you are listening on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe so that you do not miss any future lives. If you're listening on Facebook, good morning and welcome our LinkedIn crew. Thank you to those of you who religiously attend my lives. And for those of you who are brand new and you're wondering, well, who are they? Well, my name is Kathy Belletti. I'm the founder of Motivate with K.A.T, which is an admissions training and consulting company. I'm also the host of EdUp Career School's The Scoop, where I get to meet with everyone involved in the enrollment process because I believe that everyone has a voice, but seldom do people really get to express and talk about what changes we can make in higher education. With me today, I have my amazing guest, singer and songwriter, Pedro Santana. So, Pedro, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Always a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Pedro Santana. I am the Director of Enrollment Management Experiences at Stetson University. And I think we'll get into that a little bit more as to what that actually entails as we go through here. But it is definitely a pleasure to be here and excited about what we're going to be talking about.
Absolutely. And it's always a pleasure to have you, Pedro. So today we're talking about the student experience versus the employee experience. And the reason why we chose this topic is because seldom do we realize how critical our employee experience is to the student experience. And a lot of times we're always preaching in admissions about, oh, make sure that we're, really taking care of our students. We're always talking about the student experience. And a lot of times our advisors are going, yeah, I hear that all the time, but I don't get it. What is the student experience? So we're going to walk you through that today. So Pedro, start us off in your words. What is the student experience and how does that actually tie into the growth of our schools?
I think, let me give you a scenario. I think that'll help out a little bit. One of the things with my position is a fairly new one, and it was a position that was created specifically after I came on board, this Director of Enrollment Management Experiences. Now, people have approached me and asked me questions as to what does that mean? It's a cool title. What does that look like? Are you the guy who arranges for inflatables and zip lines on campus and things like that, and talk about all this experience and experiential things? And no, that's not me. That's not what we do. When we're talking about experiences, I was thinking about this earlier. It's kind of like when somebody asks you, how was your weekend? And you say it was great. And so the follow-up question is always, oh yeah, well, what did you do? And you say, absolutely nothing. I did nothing and it was a great weekend. Okay. And so what does that mean? It means that it's not full of all these external things that get us excited on all these other things. What does that mean when I think about this great weekend that I did nothing? It meant that when I was at home, everything worked as it was supposed to. I opened up the refrigerator, there was food there. You didn't have that experience. Oh, now I got to go to the store because there's nothing here. You read the instructions and for whatever you were cooking up, and it worked just as it was supposed to. And you had a great lunch. You turned on the TV and the show that you wanted to watch was there with a new episode. All of these little things, there's the daily stuff, the small stuff, it just worked perfectly. And so on this day that you did nothing, it was the most perfect experience, right? And so I think about that when it comes to on campus, when it comes to employee and staff experiences. What does that experience mean? It means that when the student comes on to fill out their application, to go do their checklist, to call financial aid about something, whatever the case may be, it works. The experience that they had worked. There's no drama. There's no excuses. It was a smooth thing, smooth transaction. And it worked just as it was supposed to, just as you promised. And that experience was a pleasant one. It was one that was like, I'm looking forward to what comes next because this first part worked great, And so I think we can translate that as well into the employee experience. How does that mean? What does that look like? Well, when things go as they're supposed to, when your supervisor is available, when your resources are there, when the computers are working, when you're getting the support, whatever it may be, when it works, when what was promised is delivered, then that allows you as an employee to give the student, the prospect, the family, whoever it might be. Maybe the other person is someone else, another colleague. Um, it helps you be able to help them have a good experience. So that is what the experience that I'm concerned about and interested in. That's what that's all about.
I love that. And I love the analogy that you mentioned in the beginning because it really ties into how does one feel during a certain
Mhm.
process? How do you think that actually ties into the growth of a school?
Well, it's one of those things where it's kind of like one of those a happy wife is a happy life type thing. Um, so if the experience is a good one, then people naturally are going to say, hey, you should check it out. I had a good time. I learned a lot. It was beneficial. I found value, and you probably will too. So, conversely, if it's not there, then you've got people who will easily and rapidly and voraciously tell people, warning, don't go there. Don't even try it. Waste of time. They ripped you off, whatever the case may be. Um, they will loudly say, stay away.
Absolutely. I love that. And here's another point, too. Every other company outside of higher education
Yep.
always talks about the consumer, the customer experience, customer service, the follow up, the follow through, empathy, expectations. How does the process
Yep.
work so that customers understand what to expect next? The problem is higher education refuses to come to terms with the fact that our students are consumers. A consumer is a person who makes a purchase for a product or service for their own personal use. A sale is a transaction between
Yep.
a buyer and seller for a something that's tangible or intangible in exchange for money. It's the same thing. And I feel like if higher education will adapt these type of principles, our students and our employees overall will have a better experience.
I could
It's
not agree more.
it's the bottom line. Where do you think some schools, kind of fall short or go left when it comes to the student experience?
And this is one of those really tricky ones because there's so many opinions on this,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of feelings that are involved with this. And I've always been confused by the idea that we can't look at students as consumers, um, because I don't get it. Every day, at least within the administration, we're looking at numbers, we're looking at the budget, we're looking at, are we going to meet this, are we going to do that, how much do we need to spend here, how much do we need to come in here. I mean, we get our numbers, our enrollment numbers, based on finances. At the end of the day, we need X number of students so that we can meet budget, so that we can build that thing, so that we can enhance that. It's a transaction, no matter how you want to look at it. Um, and so I think the biggest problem there is that for some reason, people think that talking about it in that sense cheapens the higher education purpose. And so, no, it's not something we sell. It's something that we share. It's something
Mhm.
that we give freely. But if we were really going to do that, then our campuses aren't going to look the way they do. I mean, we'd be talking about, meeting under a tree somewhere and just having some sort of a talk. You can easily share the same information the same way,
Mhm.
right? But we want to provide something different. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, my biggest thing with this is that the higher ed experience, we need to figure out what our purpose is, right? We need to figure out, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, I'm sure, but we
Mhm.
need to figure out what is the point of it all. Okay. So with that in mind, we always go into it thinking, okay, my job in higher ed is to help the person in front of me gain wisdom, knowledge, information, opportunities, et cetera, so that then their life can be better. And so that in turn, the world can be better. That at the bottom line, that is our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And we do it in ways that cost money, unless we've got funders somewhere, which we always do, and for the most part, but that costs money to do it the way we do it. And so I don't understand why we can't think of that and think we're going to charge something, and that exchange of money, or that exchange of goods for services, or money for services and goods, why that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and we have plenty of opportunities within our mission to give that out without any monetary exchange. But the majority of what we do is a monetary exchange, and that's okay. I mean, let's get real. There are departments, there are financial aid departments and registrar's offices that if you didn't pay your bill,
Mm-hmm.
your access to register for classes is shut off right away. So until we reconcile that, then we need to be honest. It's a transaction, and there's nothing wrong with that. It does not cheapen the purpose of what we do.
Absolutely. I can understand why higher education may feel that way because, a lot of times when people think about sales, they think about pushy car salesmen, and it goes way beyond that. But I think that a lot of times schools fall short because sometimes our students are just lost in the sauce. They don't know what the process is. And I know sometimes advisors out there, I know you guys are frustrated because you enroll so many people up front. And then somewhere along the line, they start to drop off one by one. And by the time we get to the first day of the class, it's like, wait a minute, these people were totally excited. What happened?
Yep.
Well, because clear expectations were not set from the very beginning. So now our students don't know what's the next step. Who are they supposed to be communicating with next? And in a lot of cases, our students don't always take the initiative to call a school or their advisor and say, hey, Pedro, what's my next step? Most students are going to go, okay, you know what? This is a sign. Maybe I jumped into this way too soon, abort mission. And then all of a sudden they disappear.
But Kathy, not only that, let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Sometimes they just don't know. Sometimes they just don't know the process. They don't know that that's the next step.
Exactly.
And so they assume they engaged with you, and they're like, okay, so then whenever something's next, they're going to somehow let me know. And I know there's probably plenty of recruiters out there and counselors that are like, I've been trying to call this person. They're not answering. They're not responding to my emails and all that. It's part of the process, Somewhere in there, there's a miscommunication. And our issue on our end is that sometimes we make the misunderstanding or misconception that they haven't communicated. So that means they're not interested. Sometimes they just don't know what that step is. And you get through that with the relationship building part of it all, and we'll tap into that in a little bit with a couple other questions. But when you do that relationship building, then you start to understand that, oh, well, they didn't know that that's what they needed to do. Maybe they don't even know what they want to do yet. And this is just, everyone says I'm supposed to be going to college, and then by this time I'm supposed to have filled out this form, but now I'm feeling overwhelmed, or now, and you ghost, I mean, I'm sure that you've done it. I do it, when everything gets overwhelming, you know what? I'm dead to the world. Nobody can contact me because you're trying to sort out your feelings. You're trying to figure that out. And then we in enrollment management, we have signed up to be a part of that process. And we have to fully embrace that as a part of that enrollment process.
Absolutely. Setting the expectation from the very beginning. I mean, that also ties into you telling a student, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get multiple calls from different departments. A lot of times I hear students go, oh my gosh, why is everyone calling me? I just spoke to my advisor, now financial aid. If you're setting the tone from the very beginning and you're saying, this is what this process is going to look like, Financial aid, you may have to walk some people through this process. Not
Exactly.
everyone has filled out a FAFSA application, and some of this language is complicated. But then also giving false expectations. I hear a lot of advisors say, okay, financial aid should only take about 3 or 4 days. And then 2 weeks later, the student is still going through the process. And now it
Yep.
sounds like, hold on for a second. This is not what was told to me in the beginning. Okay, my advisors out there, you were concentrating on the wrong things. And I know in a lot of cases, some of you are driven by fear. Let's get real. We're talking about expectations, start expectations, goals. And some of you are feeling that, you know what, if I don't meet my expectation, 3 classes in the start, 3 classes in a row, we're going to be having a different type of conversation,
Yep.
right? So I'm not going to put all of that on the advisors, but at the same time, you're concentrating on the wrong thing. I always say, stop concentrating on the program. Talk to the student, get to find out who they are, because a
Yep.
lot of our students, they request informations on programs because somebody told them it was a good idea. So now, without getting to know them, you put the student in the program that doesn't fit their personality. Week 2 of class, they're going, oh my gosh, what did I do? Then
Hmm.
they realize there's a dating period, they can back out, and now retention takes a hit.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Well, not only that, and I know you've talked about this. We've both chatted about this before in in various posts and comments and things that we've talked about. Um, Another thing for us to remember is that everybody doesn't have the same support system at home,
There you go.
you know? And so sometimes we take that for granted and we forget
Mm-hmm.
that, we'll go talk to your parents. Well, I might not have parents. Well, I live with my grandma and she never went to school. She never, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they do, maybe they're not first generation, but they come from a home where it's like, I figured it out, you figure it out.
Yes.
And so then there's a whole nother set of pressures from that.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these expectations that we may just not know about. And so those are things that come out when we build that relationship. But I think we need to really go into these relationship moments, into these conversations
Mm-hmm.
with that idea of, I need to find out who this person is. What are their drivers? What are their motivations? What do they really want to do? And if they don't know, then let's talk about that. Then why did you pick this? If you're not really sure what you want to do in 4 years, then why are you so set on this? Well, because of XYZ. Okay. And so we end up having these counseling moments, these advising moments, these relational moments that we really need to get deeper into them so that we don't have those retention issues, so that we don't have those gone missing issues
Mm-hmm.
later on. It doesn't mean that it's gonna solve everything, but you're gonna have a better chance of retaining have a better chance of them being in the right program, meeting those deadlines, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. It goes back to the purpose. I was just talking to an advisor yesterday, and she was talking about enrollment numbers and figures, and this is how much you have to bring in. And I said, you know what? When you think of the admissions process, it's a communication process. That's it. All of those other intricate details when it comes to how many heads you need to start, that's irrelevant in the beginning, because if you take care of the student, the rest of the students are going to come, right? But when you really think about it, you're talking to a student, you're finding out about them, what are their needs, how come they haven't moved forward, and now you're looking at your school and what you have to offer, and if you're a good fit, if you
Yep.
can actually help that student. And I think sometimes our advisors are in a box where it's like, no, 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 I have to enroll the student. They
Yep.
came in as a lead that cost $200. I
Yep.
can't disappoint the school. I can't disappoint marketing. They have to turn into an enrollment. And part of helping a student is saying, you know what, we may not be a good fit for you at this point in time, but here's some place that might suit you better. And our students, they appreciate that. They
Kathy,
definitely
let me tell you, one of the biggest things on that resonates is that we have to be having honest conversations.
conversations.
Not only with the student,
Mhm.
but also with our administration. We have to have honest conversations with our supervisors, with our VPs, with our deans to say, this is what I'm hearing. How are we? How do we fix this? I keep getting. what I mean by that, we need to have conversations where we're not afraid to say, this isn't working. I am making those calls. I have been sending those emails. I
Mhm.
am sending, but they're not responding to me. Is there something wrong in our messaging? Are we not offering what is relevant in the, so, and those are bigger conversations that need to be happening, but we need to be honest so that then we can, so that that pressure is not just on the advisor to sell it no matter what. I mean, you said the whole sales thing is the pushy used car salesman
Mhm.
thing, right? But the ironic part about it is, unless we have those honest conversations, our institutions are becoming pushy car salesmen. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, I don't care. You need to enroll that person, figure out how to get them in, tell them to come talk to the manager, you know, and or whatever it is. And so we need to have those honest conversations on both sides and say, it's okay. You know, that might not be the student we want. And that student needs to be able to be told, this might not be the best fit, you know, or this program might not be, or maybe this term is not the best one for you right now. Um, because at the end of the day, we want quality, right? Quality over
Exactly.
numbers, right? Because if we don't tackle that now and we're not honest about it now, it's going to show up later,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and it might be somebody else's problem, but institutionally, it'll be our problem as a whole, you know?
Absolutely. And advisors, here's a quick lesson for you. You're talking to a student. I always tell advisors the program comes in, turn the paper over. Because, perfect example, someone calls in for a medical billing and coding program, but as you're speaking to them, they're telling you, you know what, I do not work well independently. When it comes to time management, I'm horrible. Attention to detail out the window. And I have to be in an environment where I'm around people and I'm talking to patients all day long. But because the lead form says medical billing and coding, you put them in the program. They
Yep.
start school and they're like, this is boring because you never asked any questions. Get to know the student first. Ask them about their
Mhm.
personality. Where do they see themselves working? What are some of the skills that they want to learn? And then based on what they're saying, read between the lines and let them know, you know what, based on what you said earlier, this is not the best program for you. Here's what I have. And
Yep.
this is why. And now a student will say to you, wow, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And it comes off as if you're actually listening. That's
Yep.
the key to retaining more students. You have to be able to identify what their need is and then pair that to what your school actually has to offer. What are some things that you think we can begin to fix, Pedro, in order, to create a better, experience for our students?
I think overall, and this may be out of the hands of the average advisor,
Mhm.
um, but overall, we need to do things in an attitude of, we're in this together, you know. For example, let me give you this example that is very real, very recent, something I was working on in the last couple of weeks. I saw this discussion on Facebook of a parent um, complaining about their experience at our school. And this was in a parent group, and this parent just went off, and they were going off, and they didn't care who was. It was her moment of truth, you know. And so within that group, there's new parents coming in, and they're like, "This is scary to hear. I'm a little concerned." So this parent, their student just graduated in May after 4 years with honors, and was having she said that she loved the school, the program she was in, the faculty that helped her with that, but she hated their experience with a certain department, you know, and our admissions department was a part of that as well. And so and she said it was the whole 4 years. Everything was great except here. They were overselling. They weren't receptive. They weren't available when problems were happening. Nobody cared. Nobody would respond. Nobody would answer. Nobody anything. Long story short, here we are in July. Student still hasn't received their diploma after 4 months. I mean, after graduating May, and after 4 years of hard work, graduating with honors, And here they are. This school has screwed me over. Okay. And pause on that for a second, because I think this is one of those things where I say we have to be honest about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, facts are facts. And this is a situation that's going on. And here's one parent who is going to make it her mission to
Mm-hmm.
tell everybody about how wrong the situation was.
Yeah.
And a warning to all of you and whatnot, be careful, because they're going to get you. Right now, this is a specific situation. It is one situation, whereas all the other ones went really, really well. This one, for whatever reason, it was a mess. Okay. So anyway, I reach out to this parent and I find out, hey, I heard of your situation. Give me some info. Let me see what I can find out.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to this other department. And I said, what's the story here? First of all, they within just a few minutes, literally within like the first 3 minutes, they said, oh, well, I see this over here and this over here, and this was never applied to this, and now she's graduated. So and I said, well, is it, are we able to do it? Yeah, we can get this done. And I said, then why hasn't it been done? Here we have a parent now who is super upset. It has marred the whole experience for them. And it goes on and on, so I don't want to bore you with all the details, but it goes on and on with that. And then I would hope that the situation was solved, but it wasn't. Then they didn't reach out to the parent. So we fixed it internally, but then no one let the parent know. And there's so many different layers of this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that most institutions find themselves here where it was, well, that's not my department. Well, that was, over here, it's fine. And I'm doing you a favor by looking this up, but it looks like that ball was dropped over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, side note, they always drop the ball or whatever. And so then it's like, okay, but we interact, and what they do over there affects what we do over here and what you do over there. And so we get that done, right? And then because it wasn't really their problem, they're not going to reach out, even though they fixed it, right? Long story short, I get the whole situation resolved. I talked to the parent, and I was dreading the phone call because, like, oh my God. Because on top of that, then it was going to take still another couple of weeks for other reasons, vacations and different things. And so it was going to be another 2 or 3 weeks before this thing got mailed out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to call this person, and I started with saying, I was really hoping that I was going to be able to call you and say, here is your thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you've been waiting for. It's all done. And I said, but I wasn't able to do that. However, I did find out that this was taken care of. Made sure that this was done, and there's nothing else holding anything back. Now, situation has resolved. It's going to take a couple of weeks until you actually receive the diploma, but it's on its way, and you're not going to have to worry about it. And the change in this parent's attitude, night and day, I felt, even we had exchanged comments and things in Messenger before, she and I, so I knew she was okay. She was happy that I was involved.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line on this was, she said, all I wanted to know was that somebody was taking care of this, and somebody was interested in
Yeah.
helping. And so your question, I think, was, how do we do this?
Mm-hmm.
How do we fix this? And I think the biggest thing is to get out of the box of, well, that's not my job.
That's not my job.
First of all, because at the end of the day, whatever that department's doing and whatever the other department's doing, it is a part of your job, because our job is to take care of the student,
Mm-hmm.
period. Whether you work in admissions, financial aid, athletics, faculty, academic, whatever it is, our mission is to help this student. And so whatever we need to do as an institution, whether it is in your box of responsibilities or not, you have to push forward to helping that student. And I think if we keep that at the center of our conversations, if we keep that student at the center of all of it, it helps us with the decisions that we make every day. It helps us push forward instead of looking at it as, and you've talked about this before, instead of looking at it as this student is student X. It is number 34 of our grouping that we bought the name from, what, and we categorize students way too often.
Yeah.
And so it's like, no, this is Mary, and Mary lives in Sanford, Florida, and she wants to. And so when you personalize it and you realize my job is to help Mary achieve or get into a position to fulfill her dreams and goals. That is our job as an institution. That is our job as a department. That is a job. That is our job. And so we need to get out of that mentality of, well, no, that's not what we do in admissions, or that's not what we do in financial aid, or that's not. No, then you get off your desk, get and walk down to that department and say, here's the student's number. Let's look this up. How do we solve this? How do we resolve this? What do we need to do before we send that student on a wild goose chase and say, hey, call that other department? No, we need to make that call. We need to figure it out, because that student is the purpose.
Absolutely. It's funny because as you were speaking, I started to feel good and where the story was going. And I'm not even the mom, right?
Yeah.
But just hearing you say, hey, I was hoping that I was going to be able to tell you this, but on the other hand, this is what's taking place. It's all a part of customer service. And I think it's very important that even if you don't have an answer, let the person know that you don't have an answer. Here, I'm just calling to check in. And I think sometimes we forget how it feels to be on the receiving end, right? That waiting period, people being left hanging. When you get to a certain, level in your career, you forget what it feels like to be the consumer, and I think another thing is setting clear expectations and realistic timelines for our students. If you set them up from the very beginning and you let them know your expectations, I really want to help you get to the next level. However, this is a 50-50 relationship. Okay, I'm going to take you this far, but this is what you need to do in order to help yourself. I think that's also going to tie into the student, experience, and then the departments, just like you mentioned earlier. I always hear growing a school is an admissions job. No, it's the entire school's job to grow a school. If one student has a problem, it's everyone's responsibility. And what people don't understand is one single student can make or break your establishment. Right. And if you take care of that student, guess what? They're going to trust you with their friends and their family members. And now your school begins to grow because of the student experience.
Kathy, let me jump in here. Let me jump in here though. Going off of that, one of the things that in a prior situation I had an administrator ask me, where is this conversation happening? And because I was in an exchange with a parent and we were going back and forth, and she's like, because we don't have anything in the notes here. We don't have anything. I don't see that this parent called us within the last week or whatnot. And I said, this parent reached out to me on Facebook Messenger. Right. Wow. And the person was like, well, we need to get the conversation off of there and have them call us over here. And I said, wait a minute. I understand the logistics of that. And we are going to put all of this information in the notes. And that's another thing. Make sure that all the stuff is in the notes so that anybody that comes across that record is going to know what's going on, instead of, well, fill me in because nobody wrote notes. But this was the thing with this other situation, not this one. But I said, I am not going to tell this parent that she can't talk to me on Messenger when it's the only system that she's gotten through to somebody who even cared enough to help her through the situation. Now, I know that brings up a whole nother lengthy list of legalities and problems and things like that, but we need to figure out ways to fix our systems and make sure that we are available for people, for our consumer who we entered, and this is another thing, we entered into a contractual obligation with them, a contractual relational obligation with them. And for whatever reason, um, all too often, we end up taking this whole, well, that obligation is on their end, not ours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they are required to do this, 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 this. But we as an institution, we also have made promises. And we said we were going to make things available to them. And we said we were going to um, make the experience work,
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't fall into this habit of being like, well, had they called at this time, um, it would have gotten done. But they're calling at 4 o'clock and the office is closed at 4:30. So, or whatever. And of course, you don't want every student calling you then or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also, this is where that customer relationship experience happens. Then it's like, if for whatever reason you're not able to attend to that real quick, then you can also say, hey, Mary, listen, I really am interested, or I really want to get to this. Unfortunately, I can't do this right now. Let me get a good callback number for you, and I'll call you first thing in the morning. Or what's a good time I can call you back? And just make it a priority to do that instead of just being like, oh, well, tell them to call back.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's frustrating. So don't get me frustrated.
Well, the last thing is basically making sure that you know who's also involved in the decision making
Sure.
process. And I think sometimes that process is broken because you're talking to a potential student, and we already know what happens when it comes to dependent students. Okay.
Yeah.
If the buying committee is not involved, guess what? You don't have an enrollment, so you might as well just. But I
Yep.
think sometimes we get to a certain point in the enrollment process, and the people who matter are not involved. And now there's this friction going on because the students need your support in order to talk to their guardian, their parent, the person who is most
Right.
influential over their decision. And a student can never explain or sell the value of your school the way that you can. And I think this is one of the areas where some advisors are not comfortable talking to the buying committee,
Yep.
but letting the student know upfront, I'm here as a support. Okay, you already told me that your mom doesn't know about the financial aid process. She thinks the government is out there to steal her information. I can actually jump in and help walk you through that conversation. So what's a good time for me to jump on the phone with you and your mom? It goes back to
Right.
support. Your students need your support. It's not about just pushing them in and it's like, all right, got the enrollment, on to the next one. You have to make
Yep.
sure that that student is able to follow through.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kathy, and on that note too, if you as an advisor are
Mhm.
finding every other person that you're talking to is having this situation, or this is how you were trained to do something, or these are the resources you have, but you find that if I explain it this way to them, then they get it. Whereas if I explain it that way, there seems to be more problems, then start working a solution out. As you are part of the solution committee, your job is to make these things happen. And you are a leader, whether you know it or not, whether you are whether your title says admissions leader, you are a leader, and that could be whatever department you're in, whether you're admissions or not. But in admissions, if you are having the situation and you have a better way, say something. Create a little a Word document or something. Say, hey, this is a cheat sheet that I've come up with that has helped me. Maybe we should incorporate this, or maybe we can look at expanding this because what we have isn't working. And that's what people are afraid to say. Hey, you know what? They were doing that doesn't work, or however many thousands of dollars that we spent on that outside advisor who told us to do this. Well, doesn't seem to be working. But this thing I created yesterday, I've gotten some good success with.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to not my job. Well, it is your job. It is your job to come up with good ideas and share those ideas.
Absolutely. And Pedro, that's a whole nother webinar
It
because
certainly
we can
is.
easily get into why employees don't speak up,
Sure.
right? Because when it comes to irresponsible leadership, sometimes when you're in that seat, you don't realize that it's a responsibility. And you may
Yeah.
have some amazing people on your team who are the key to fixing certain situations at your school, but you're sitting in the seat of I'm always correct, so your opinion doesn't count, which
Right.
is why some people don't speak up. But that ties into our pivot into the employee culture and the employee experience, because I think we need to get to a point where everyone understands that if you don't take care of the employee, guess what? Your student is not going to be taken care of. Period. The bottom line is happy employees are more productive. Respected and valued employees work harder. Employees who are appropriately compensated work harder. And the bottom line is there has been a huge shift in admissions because the turnover in admissions is ridiculous. It's
Sure.
disheartening. And the person who gets hurt in the end is the student, period. And we have to get to the point where we understand how critical the employee experience is to the overall student experience.
Yeah.
So, what do you think really contributes to a healthy company culture?
Well, one, let's go back to the idea that we have a consumer culture here,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a transactional thing. So in corporate world, in retail world, you have your internal and external customers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so in this particular case, your students may be your external customer, but your colleagues and your employees are your internal customers that you need to make sure that you are taken care of in the very same way, if not better, than that prospect that we have. We spend so much time, money, and effort on trying to bring in new students and get that attention and all the swag and all the events and
Mm-hmm.
the billboards and whatever the case may be. We spend the money, but when it comes to our employees, there's no money in the budget, right? Well, I think that's one thing that needs to change, but that goes to that other podcast that we're going to do. So, um, but in terms of as an advisor, as a counselor, as a recruiter, one of the things that I would highly recommend is finding somebody you can talk to. You
Mm-hmm.
know, one of the things that I love about following you in our conversations, whether it be live or whether it be messages or comments, is that I know I can count on you to be 100% real. And you and I think alike in many ways. And so I know if you were a colleague on campus with me, I would be in your office at least once a week saying, all I'd have to do is look at you and you'd be like, yeah, I know.
Uh-huh.
Do we need to close the door? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I get it. And so you need to find somebody that you can, or a team of somebody
Mm-hmm.
that you can be honest with, be honest and say, this sucks. I don't agree with this. How do I fix it? But you need to be careful and make sure that it's somebody that is solutions oriented.
There you go.
It's like, yeah, I don't really like the way this is going. I'm confused. I'm scared. I'm
Mm-hmm.
nervous. I'm angry. How do we fix it? And then you just start going, okay, I know this is what they tell us to do, but let's look at it this way.
Yeah.
So you need to develop a team of people around you that can encourage you, because we all know there are going to be days that are less than encouraging, and so you need to find that person that can say, oh, wait, back away from the edge. Come on,
Yeah.
let's talk this through. And hopefully that person is somebody that can also just motivate you and encourage you to be in a positive space, so that when you're out of that conversation, then not only are you okay, but you're back to being excited for what you're doing.
Absolutely. It ties into empathy. And I think a lot of times when it comes to leadership, we don't show enough empathy to our employees. We always talk about making sure that we understand the student background, their circumstances, empathize with our students. But when it comes to employees, it's called drama.
Yep.
Why is that? Your employees, they're people too,
Yep.
with real issues and with real circumstances. The other part to that is when it comes to expectations, tying it right back to the beginning with how some advisors think, I must enroll this student. It's okay to give high expectations, but give them a plan on how they're actually going to reach those expectations, because no
Yep.
one wants to feel as if they're failing and they're incompetent. So when you're putting these limits on your advisors and they're like, okay, well, I don't even know how to start, they're going to enroll anyone. And they're just going to be counting, all right, 10 more to go, 9 more to go. And now you have a bunch of students who are misplaced in your programs. Get yourself a trainer. That communication piece between your students and the advisor is critical to the success of your establishment. And the last thing is check-ins. You have to make sure that you're checking in with your team, whether as a group or one-on-ones. That also ties into exit interviews. Some
Sure.
schools don't want to do exit interviews because they don't really want to know the purpose of why their employees keep leaving. If
Yep.
you are a school and you have gone from 14 to 2 advisors, or every single week somebody is walking out, you can't keep dismissing it to, well, guess it wasn't for them. No, 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 no. At some
Well,
point,
why do we leave exit interviews for after they've left? So why not? I mean, it goes to a check-in or whatever we want to call it.
yeah.
But if you have those honest conversations with people and you've created an environment where it's safe to say, I don't know if this is really going to work out. Hold up, let's talk about it. Why not? What is it that's causing problems? What is it? Why do we wait until like, oh, well, they quit, they didn't show up for work? Now, you know, when I was asked to find a new desk for my position, I chose a desk that I had to walk all the way across the floor, and I ended up passing by everyone every day. I'm passing by everyone's desk, everyone's office, both times. Now it's a real pain when I have to go to the bathroom because I have to go all the way around again. But other than that, it's one of those things where I get to see everybody. And there's plenty of times where on my way in or out or throughout the day, I just stop in and I sit down. I'm like, hey, what's up? How you doing? What's going on? I like that shirt, whatever the case may be, and we have those little 2-second conversations, and you can gauge, and you're like, you're not telling me the truth. What's up? Do we need to set some time up? Do you want to go for a walk? I think that in admissions, and this happens everywhere, it's not just admissions, we get so isolated in our jobs. When I moved into this new position, I moved from the first floor near the front door where all the activities happening, all the campus visitation and all that, student employees. I moved up to the third floor where it's more corporate. Everyone has their desks and we're all busy, we're doing things. And you are removed from that activity. You're removed from the purpose of what the institution is, ironically, right? So here we are trying to drive this mission, but at the same time, we've removed ourselves from the mission, and everything becomes numbers and all of that. So back to what you're saying, the check-in, just check in with your people. I think one thing you said that was really important, you started mentioning about failure. And it's something that's been a conversation that has popped up a lot this week, especially if you're talking about new people at work. A lot of times our admissions counselors are new employees. They're new to the workplace and to the workforce. There's two things. One is the failure of not being able to do your job right. And then helping that employee figure out that it's okay. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to not get this one right. And you talk through that, and you develop that strength. It's like working out. You lift weights until you're exhausted, and you're like, you didn't fail. Tomorrow you're going to be able to lift up a couple more. But it feels like you failed. It feels like you're exhausted. You're dead. And that's the same principle here. You may have failed today, but if you're open to figuring out how to make it a little bit better, tomorrow you're going to do even better. And I listened to a clip that I found online the other day. It was Ed Sheeran who was talking about failure. He was on a podcast, and I think it was Howard Stern who asked him, he said, it must be lucky to be able to sing. You were born with this gift. And he says, no, I wasn't. He says, there's a YouTube clip, and he directed him to it. So there's the two things on that. He said, don't be afraid, point out your failures, look at it, make fun of yourself. There's been growth. So he said, tell everyone to go to this YouTube clip. And it was me at 14. And here I was singing the song, and it was a produced song,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so it wasn't something in his bedroom. It was something he went to a studio, they recorded, that was engineered, and it wasn't good. You know, there were moments where it's like, oh, wow, that's nice. um, but he laughed through it. And he says, but 4 years later, is when he got his major hit that put him on the market and worldwide. He says there was 4 years of growth from that moment. He said, I kept going and I kept getting better and I kept improving. And then only a short 4 years later, then he's known worldwide for this amazing singer-songwriter. But it was because he failed. And he said he kept going, though. You keep working through that failure. And so for the employee, we have to really encourage people. It's okay. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to not get it right, and work through it. What are you not understanding? What went wrong here? How do we fix it? Well, let's try this. And if you need my help, I'm available. I'm serious. Come sit down with me. And then for the employer, you know, you have to be encouraging despite the failures. You have to be encouraging despite the numbers not being met. And then if there are systems in place that are making people fail or helping people to fail, then it's your job as an employer to say, hold up, I know I made that decision 6 months ago. Maybe it was the wrong decision and we need to fix it, and be open to making changes and changes quickly.
Exactly. I always say there's always a reason to celebrate. You know, I've worked with advisors where they didn't meet their start expectation, but I was able to say, hold on for a second, but you used to average 80 calls a day and now you're averaging 200. You know, there was a certain type of lead that you always, you know, threw up your hands at. You're like, oh my gosh, every time I get this type of student, I don't know what to say. And now you're like dominating. You have to be able to find something within your activity to celebrate, because it makes you feel good and it builds your confidence. And as leaders, all they want to hear is one thing: how can I help you? And I don't think that that's something that we say enough when it comes to leadership. What can I do to support you? You'd be surprised. Your employees are looking at you like you have three heads, like, wow, that's different. But it shouldn't even be like that. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, Pedro?
I do. And I think it's important. I think you demonstrated it really well right there. Is as leaders, we need to be empathetic, and we need to be intentional about what we say and what we do. We're busy. Everyone's busy, but you're never too busy to say, hey, what's up? You okay? You know, do you need a minute? Let's talk. It makes a huge difference, not only for our employees, but for our students as well. You know, when you see them and you're like, hey, you don't look so well, you know, everything, what's on your mind? So we as leaders, whether it be admissions or as the employer, we need to be always intentional about doing that. And because the reality is sometimes we don't see it. We don't see that change. You mentioned, hey, wait a minute, you struggled here 6 months ago and now you're killing it on this side. But we don't always see that transition. As the person in it, we don't realize how much we've grown. And it takes a good leader to be able to say, you might not have seen it, but let me show you. Step back here to where I'm looking at. You were over there and now you're way over here now. And I'm really proud of you. That was great. That's something that we don't say, you know, in offices. I'm proud of you. Come on, who says that? Nobody. It's not we say it in my environment, but it's because I'm like, hey, I really appreciate you. Not a day goes by that I don't tell somebody, I really appreciate you being here. You know, I appreciate that you said that. I appreciate that you showed up, you know, because you make my day better. Just even if you don't help me with anything, I hear you laugh in the corner and it puts a smile on my face. And you don't know what that other person's going through. And that might just be the thing that sets them off to success, you know? So we have to be intentional with those things.
Absolutely. Love it. Well, Pedro, thank you so much for joining me today. It was definitely an amazing and insightful, you know, conversation. I hope you listeners really walked away with some amazing gems today. In closing, take care of your employees and they're going to take care of your students, aka consumers. Sometimes all your employees want to hear is great job. Thank you for being here, because some of you have people who are drowning and you have no idea because
Yep.
you don't take the time to ask. Thank you guys for joining today. And until next time, thank you once again, Pedro.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.